You step outside at night. The sky above you looks empty. A streetlight hums. A tree moves slightly in the dark. And then something crosses the air. Small, fast, almost weightless. It turns sharply, then turns again, as if the night itself has folded around it. To us, a bat in flight can look like disorder. A dark animal cutting through a dark space. Sudden movement. No clear path. A little unsettling. But the chaos is ours, not hers. That bat is not lost in the dark. She is reading it. Every second, she sends sound into the world. Most of it is too high for us to hear. The sound moves outward, touches the surfaces around her, and comes back changed. From that returning echo, she learns what is near, what is far, what is hard, what is soft, what is moving, what is alive. A wall, a branch, an insect wing, the opening between two trees, the surface of water below. Where we see darkness, she receives structure. Where we hear silence, she receives information. And recently, scientists discovered that this ability reaches farther than many people imagine. Not just around a branch, not just toward a moth. Across kilometers, through unfamiliar terrain, back to a home she cannot see. This film is about what that means. Not simply that bats use echolocation. Most people know that. This is about something stranger and more revealing. How a brain can build a world from echoes. How sound can become space. How space can become memory. And how intelligence can take shape in a reality almost completely closed to us. Start with the simplest part. A bat calls. Not because she is frightened. Not because she is calling to us. This is how she reaches into space. Many echolocating bats produce sounds above the range of human hearing. The call travels outward from the mouth or nose in a focused beam, almost like a flashlight made of sound. But unlike light, this beam returns. It strikes a surface and comes back as an echo. And the echo is not empty. It carries information. If the echo returns quickly, the object is close. If it returns later, the object is farther away. If the frequency shifts, the object may be moving. If the sound comes back sharp, the surface may be hard. If it comes back softer or more scattered, the surface may be textured, irregular, or alive. The bat's brain receives these differences at incredible speed. It does not wait for a full picture. It updates the world continuously. Call, echo, correction. Call, echo, correction. Flight becomes a conversation between body and environment. This is why a bat can avoid a branch in darkness, why it can follow a flying insect, why it can skim close to a surface and not collide. It is not flying through emptiness. It is flying through returning information. But for a long time, there was a limit to how people imagined this ability. Echolocation was treated as a near-field tool, excellent for the immediate world. A moth, a wall, a cave entrance, a tree, but not a whole landscape, because sound fades, echoes weaken. A bat does not receive the entire world at once. She sends sound into a small section of space, waits for what comes back, and moves. So the question becomes sharper. How can an animal build a map of a large place from signals that seem so local? How can a bat know where she is, not just what is in front of her? To answer that question, researchers did something unusually direct. They moved the bats. In a study published in 2024, scientists working with Kuhl's pipistrelles, tiny bats weighing only a few grams, captured individuals near their roosts and released them at unfamiliar points within their home range. Then they made the test harder. For some bats, vision was blocked. For others, smell or magnetic sensing was blocked. And for one group, only echolocation remained. No useful vision, no smell, no magnetic compass, just the call, the echo, and whatever map the bat carried inside. The result was startling. Most of the bats returned home within minutes, even the bats navigating by echolocation alone. At first, their flights were not straight. They looped, they explored, they moved near trees, roads, edges, buildings, and other features of the landscape. Then something changed. The wandering stopped. The flight became directed. The bat had located herself. And once she knew where she was, she could go home. The researchers then asked what the bats were using. Not every part of a landscape sounds the same. An open field is acoustically poor. A forest edge is richer. A building corner returns a more complex echo than a flat wall. Some places have distinctive acoustic signatures. They are not visual landmarks. They are echo landmarks, places recognizable by the way they answer sound. The bats appeared to use these acoustically rich features to identify their position within a familiar area. In other words, they were not merely reacting to obstacles. They were using echoes to place themselves inside a mental map, a cognitive map made not of images, but of sound. This is the point where the bat becomes more than a creature that flies well in the dark. She becomes an animal carrying an internal geography we cannot imagine from the inside. A home range made of echoes. A landscape remembered by the way it answers. A map is not only a path. A map is a way for a brain to answer a question. Where am I? In mammals, one of the most important structures for that question is the hippocampus. In the 1970s, scientists discovered neurons known as place cells, cells that become active when an animal is in a particular location. One cell for one place, another cell for another. Together, they form something like an internal map. Not a paper map, not a picture. A living pattern of activity that helps an animal locate itself in space. Bats have place cells too. That already makes sense. They fly through complex three-dimensional environments. They return to roosts, foraging sites, water, trees, caves, and safe paths. They need memory not only of direction, but of volume, height, distance, and route. But in social bats, researchers found something even more interesting. In studies of Egyptian fruit bats moving freely in group settings, hippocampal neurons did not only represent where the bat was, they also responded to the social world around that location. Was another bat present? Which bat was it? Was this a familiar partner? A particular individual? A landing place was not just a point in space. It could become a social place. The brain was not mapping the room as empty geometry. It was mapping a lived world. Where? And who? Together. That matters because a bat's world is not made only of trees, walls, insects, and distances. It is also made of others. Voices in the roost, bodies nearby, associates, rivals, young, mothers, males, known individuals moving through the same darkness. For a bat, space is not neutral. A place can mean shelter, food, risk, home, and also someone is there. That is a different kind of map. Not only a map of objects, a map of relationships inside space. To understand why this matters, imagine a roost, not as a silent cave, as a crowded acoustic world. Bodies hanging close together, wings shifting, mothers and young, adults returning, calls overlapping. A colony is not quiet. It is full of voices. And in many bat species, voice is not just noise. It carries identity. A bat can learn who is calling, and sometimes that knowledge matters immediately. In a recent study of greater sac-winged bats, researchers examined distress calls, the harsh, urgent sounds a bat may produce when caught or threatened. The calls carried individual vocal signatures. In other words, they were not only distress calls, they were someone's distress calls. Then the researchers created a conflict. They played the recorded distress call of a group member, but at the same time, that same bat was visible in the roost, safe and unharmed. The sound said danger. The sight said no. And the listening bats did not respond as if the call were real. They weighed one kind of information against another. They compared the voice to the visible situation. They rejected the contradiction. This may sound small. It is not small. It means the bat was not simply triggered by a distress sound. It was evaluating context. It was holding together two versions of the same individual, the individual as heard and the individual as seen, and then deciding which version made sense. That is a sophisticated act, not because it looks like human reasoning, but because it shows a mind integrating different signals into a more reliable model of reality. A bat in a roost does not merely hear alarm. It hears whose alarm. It checks whether the world agrees. And if the world does not agree, it can ignore the call. This is how a social acoustic world becomes intelligent. Not just sound, not just reaction, recognition, context, judgment. No bat is born already carrying the whole map. The body comes prepared. The ears, the wings, the nervous system, the instinct to call and listen. But the world itself has to be learned. Which places matter, which routes work, which voices belong, which sounds mean danger, which calls can be trusted, which individuals are close, which food sources are worth remembering. Bats are often intensely social animals, and in many species, knowledge moves through the group. Young bats can learn from others. Adults can influence where food is found. In some cases, bats use social information to discover new food sources or reduce uncertainty in unfamiliar situations. For an animal living in darkness, this matters. A single bat can learn from experience, but a colony can carry experience across individuals. And in some species, the learning begins with sound itself. Greater sac-winged bat pups produce long sequences of vocal practice, often described as babbling. Not speech, not language in the human sense, but a developmental stage in which the young animal rehearses parts of the adult vocal repertoire, and adults respond. Mothers change the qualities of their calls when interacting with pups. Their voices shift in pitch and color. Researchers have compared this to baby talk, not because bats are little humans, but because the interaction may help shape vocal development. Male bats also vocalize around pups in ways that seem to carry the acoustic signature of the social group. A young bat is not only learning to make sounds, it is learning how to belong acoustically, how to sound like its group, how to become recognizable within a social world made of voices. This is where the map becomes more than private experience. The bat's world is built from echoes, but it is also built from others. From the mother who answers, from the group that surrounds the young, from the voices that mark belonging, from roots, calls, and habits that existed before one animal began to fly. The map is personal, but it is not solitary. Every animal in this series has offered a different answer to the same question. What can intelligence be? Not a single ladder, not one path toward becoming more like us, but many ways for life to meet the world. The bat adds an answer that is easy to miss because it happens in a darkness we cannot enter. Intelligence as acoustic space, a mind that builds geography from returning sound, a body that does not wait for light in order to know where it is. A social animal whose world is filled with voices, locations, routes, and identities. We often treat vision as the natural form of knowing. We say, "I see," when we mean, "I understand." We speak of insight, perspective, clarity. But the bat reminds us that sight is only one doorway into reality. There are worlds built by smell, by vibration, by pressure, by rhythm, by magnetic fields, by echo. The bat does not live in a poorer world because she does not rely on vision the way we do. She lives in another world, a world with dimensions we cannot directly receive. A world that is fast, textured, social, and precise. And this may be one of the most important lessons of animal intelligence. A mind is not only measured by what it can solve, it is shaped by what it can sense. The bat senses a night that is full, and from that fullness, it builds a map. Tonight, somewhere above a city, a field, a forest, a river, a small body will enter the dark. It will call out, and the world will answer. Not in words, not in images, in echoes. A tree will answer. A wall will answer. An insect will answer. The open path between two branches will answer. Another bat will answer. And from those answers, a brain no larger than a small piece of fruit will build a world detailed enough to move through at speed. A world we share and cannot share because we stand under the same night. We breathe the same air, but we do not receive the same reality. For us, darkness often means absence. For the bat, darkness is not empty. It is responsive. It is structured. It is alive with return. The bat does not think in darkness, despite the darkness. It thinks from within it. That is the wonder. Not that the bat escapes the dark, but that the dark, for the bat, is full of information. And once you understand that, the night above you changes. The small shape crossing the air no longer looks like a creature lost in shadow. It looks like a mind moving through a world we cannot hear. And maybe that is what this series keeps returning to. Not the question of which animal is smartest, but how many kinds of mind have been living beside us all along, built from signals we were never made to receive. At Known Wild, we follow those hidden worlds through the living world. One species, one question, one form of intelligence at a time. Subscribe, and the next story will find you.